getting on with this video. Finally, I've been wanting to do this video for months. I mean, since the last Worst to Best I did, I was saying to myself, I didn't say this to anyone else, I was saying to myself that the drones is one I must do next. And then obviously Christmas kind of rolled in really quickly. I obviously had other things to do as well. You know, I do other things in videos. Would you believe I do other things? But yeah, and then obviously all the year-end lists, and then time just escaped me. But here we are, finally sitting down to do this. I cannot wait to talk about the drones, because if you know, were to say, Ryan, say your favorite rock band ever right now, and I had to answer immediately, I would probably instinctively say the drones. I mean, I without putting thought into it, obviously there could be other bands up there too, but I just think if you were to just, you know, gun to the head situation, that kind of thing, I would probably immediately say the drones. I just adore what they do, and the fact that we're probably not going to get any more music from them, because it's been 5 years since their last album, and I think they, you know, kind of were like, this is it now. And Gareth Lydiard and, you know, some new members went on to form Tropical Fuckstorm. I feel like it's a good time really to highlight the career of this band, because they truly have put out some of the best rock albums I think I've ever heard. So if you've never listened to them, I do hope you were clicking this video to find some great rock music, because I truly think they deserve to be up there in the best of the bunch, you know. So I'm ranking 7 of their albums. Obviously, I'm going to keep TFS out of this because it's technically a different band, so I'm only focusing on the discography of the Drones, which spanned about 14 years. Not too bad, 7 albums, 14 years. Pretty good rate. And while their sound has never really varied up a huge amount, you could dispute that if you wanted, but I do think that their sound has relatively stayed similar across all their albums. I feel like each album offers something slightly different, whether it's in the way that the album's recorded. Some of them are a bit dirtier, a bit muddier, and then some of them offer completely different lyrical insight, and to varying successes, because obviously it will depend where they rank on this list. But yeah, let's get into it before I waste too much time. Here we go, kicking off here, starting at number 7. Here Come the Lies is a really good album title. I really like that album title. I think it's a great album title. Here Come the Lies. Here they are. This is just funny to me. Is their debut album, and it's interesting because, you know, if you talk to most people that like rock music or are big on rock music or any subgenres of rock music, it's usually the case where a band will start their career with their best stuff, and then people are hungry for them to go back to what they used to do. It's so frequent where, you know, rock bands go on and on and on for years. By the time they've hit a certain point in their career, they've made, you know, they're washed up. They're not making the music that they used to. People want their old stuff back. And yeah, in my opinion, they're a band that break that rule, and they essentially become the opposite of that by putting out their weakest album first, which actually is not a detriment, you know, to the quality here, because this is a good album. This is a good ass album. The first track on here, like the feedback that is roaring through, just blisters your ears. And there are so many other tracks like this on this album. It's a pretty noisy and chaotic album, honestly. It's nowhere near as polished as what we've seen them do later on in their career, but like, it's still a worthy release. Like, seriously, I think if you were just like a rock head, a rock fanatic, this might be the starting place, really go all out here. And I think Gareth is at his absolute muddiest with his vocal performances. He is a mess on this album, but he sounds pretty damn great doing what he's doing. So yeah, it's no hindrance on the quality of this release by putting it at the bottom. I'm not trying to say it's bad. It's definitely a good album, but it's just really, it just goes to show how good they got if this is the weakest album. Head like a stub in the cigarettes. At number 6 now we have The Miller's Daughter, which is their 3rd album, but it actually ended up being pretty close together to 2 other albums in their discography. They released 3 albums in a pretty short period of time. They had 2 albums in 2005 and then 1 album in 2006. This is one of those. It ends up being their 6th best album, in my opinion. I, again, think it ranks lower than some of their other ones, but mate, if this is a lower ranking in your discography, then wow, have you got a bloody stellar set of albums. It's so raw and just unapologetically punk, this one. It's like their debut in the sense that it is just so in your face and rampant. That's probably the best word to describe this. But I think, again, if you had heard some of their more acclaimed albums or their more well-known ones and you didn't like them, I feel like The Miller's Daughter and Here Come the Lies would transition you into being a fan, because these are just heavy punk releases. The track Stop Dreaming is way more in, you know, the vein of what they've done on their most famous releases, but I would say the rest of this album is very, very just angsty and just messy, but in the best ways. It's a really good release. And the track She Had an Abortion That She Made Me Pay For is heavy. The story on this is depressing as hell, but goddamn is it interesting to listen to. It's one of those really, really just twisted and mangled stories that you hear about that you kind of just want to listen to it more because of how gruesome it is. And Gareth Lydiard is a storyteller. Like, he will sell a story like no other. He really does just go into the nitty-gritty details. But yeah, really good album. And again, I would probably implore you to go with this as a starting point in their discography. So just because it ranks low doesn't mean it's bad. Now we're at the albums that I personally believe are like the best of the best. This is the starting point for me of where their albums get truly, truly fantastic. Garland Mill here at number 5. One thing I always mention about this band, and I probably repeat myself over and over again, and if you've heard me say this before in previous videos or just maybe on social media or something, you're probably going to predict what I'm about to say, but they know how to kick off an album. What the hell? This is like insane. This is one of like 5 albums where the opening track is ridiculous. I cannot. How do they do it every time? Again, not to say that The Miller's Daughter and Here Come the Lies don't have good opening tracks, but I think the 5 albums I'm going to mention now have killer opening tracks that are just insane. And they always end up being some of their best songs. Jezebel, perfect example of that. What a way to kick off an album. This track is ridiculous. They just instantly grab your attention. Like, there's no way you can escape what they're doing with an opening track. And yeah, Jezebel, one of their best. I think they blow me away every time with these. I Don't Want to Ever Change is fiery as hell. This is just a statement of a song. Like, Jesus Christ. The chorus on this is absolutely stellar. The lyrical theme, I think, is pretty fantastic too. The guitar playing on I Look Down the Line and I Wondered is to die for as well. The vocals here are absolutely stellar. Gareth Lydiard is like no other with his voice. I absolutely adore what he does. I can imagine people being put off by it a little bit. He can go into some really strange weirdisms with his vocal tone sometimes, but I think Garland Mill provides some of his best vocal performances ever. And I love the diversity of what they do too. I mean, Are You Leaving for the Country has this spaghetti western twang to it, which is really like nothing that they usually do, and yet they still manage to make it work. So yeah, man, the drones kill it, and Gala Mill is great. Feeling Kind of Free, number 4, would have ranked a bit higher actually, but when I was thinking of doing this video, I went back to some of their other albums, and it turned out that there were actually a few more that should land above this, so this probably would have been at like number 2, but again, it only goes to show how good their discography is that this can just fall a bit shorter, and I still think it's great and is on my decade list for the 2010s. So that's how good I think this band is. Maybe I'm a stan. I probably sound like I'm a stan at this point. Opening track, probably not one of the best opening tracks, but I was just going on a big tangent there as to how their opening tracks are always great. And again, with this not even being maybe their best one, it's still fucking good. Tom and Should is ridiculously catchy. My god, I love that track. I love the combination of like the bluesy punk stuff that they do too. This is probably one of their most accessible albums, actually. To Think That I Ever Once Loved You is a painful track, painful ballad with so much anguish in the vocals, and this is where they really combine the female vocals and the obviously Gareth Lydia's vocals incredibly well, which is something that if you go to their earlier releases, it's not as prominent, not as prevalent, but I think they managed to do this really well later on in their career, and they work off each other so well actually on this track. I think it's a great song on an absolutely fantastic album. Yeah, on this album, I think they combine the gloominess with the accessibility incredibly well. I've already mentioned the opening track. I think that does that sensationally, really. And yeah, just one of those albums that I think will stick with me for a long, long time. But I'd try anything if I could only get along with you. As with the number 3 spot, Havilah, which I again really had to have a think about this and ended up realizing that this is definitely one of their best. Opening track again, what? Of course, this band is from Australia, and of course, Gareth Lydia's accent is quite thick as well on many of their tracks. It really shows up on some of these tracks, though, especially the opening track, Nail It Down, which is just a ferocious opening track. Like, again, how do they keep doing that? It's mad. The Minotaur, Careful As You Go, the closing track as well, which they're also sensationally good at, by the way. I've only been mentioning the opening tracks, but they really kill it on the final songs of their albums, and this is no exception at all. This album is no exception to that rule, because it really just is a rule with the drones. And again, I think with just how blistering these tracks are, and also just fiery and accessible too, they just combine such great elements in their music. It's punk, but it's also not always punk, and it's sometimes more than that. And I just adore what they do, and this is one of the best examples in their discography. At number 2, we have Wait by the River and The Bodies of Your Enemies Will Float By, which is one of the darkest titles of any album ever. Jesus Christ. This is the second full-length album from the band, and interestingly, it ended up refining their sound quite greatly, which is interesting that The Miller's Daughter came after this, but I don't know if they were attempting to give fans 2 very polar opposite albums in the same year. I don't really know. I wasn't following them in 2005. I was 10 years old by then, so I was not listening to the Drones at 10 years old, I'm afraid. This album has a great atmosphere to it. I mean, the vocals constantly sound like they're on edge. He really sounds like he's often just about to break out into some loose, manic attack that just is insane, that you can't really quite label or describe. Some of these tracks are way more pensive, but of course there's still that heaviness to many of the tracks as well. They bring some fire to this album. Sharkfin Blues, one of the best opening tracks once again. I think the combination of blues and punk really shines through on this track. I mean, they've always had that label, blues, punk blues, but I think this album might combine those elements the best out of any album they've ever done. By the way, I'm not trying to say that they're the first band to ever do this style. They're certainly not. I mean, I couldn't tell you the exact starting point of this combination, but I think the Drones are certainly one of the best at managing to combine two worlds together, and the results are incredibly admirable. And even if, you know, they weren't combining these sounds, they still put together killer tracks regardless. So Jesus Christ, it doesn't matter what they're doing. Each album might offer something very slightly different, but they're always offering something worthwhile. And here we go with the number one album in their discography. And they only ever treat you well. If you know their discography well, you probably worked it out, because there's only 7 albums, and I haven't mentioned See Seaweed just yet, but whoa, legit, one of my favourite albums ever. One of my favourite albums of all time. There is just so much to love about this. A creeper, this album too. I mean, the first time I heard this, I liked it, but I never knew I would love it as much as I do today. The opening track, I keep fucking saying that. I was said opening track about 30 times in this one video, but no, the title track, the opener to this album, one of the best opening songs I think I'll ever hear in my life. I do not know how they managed to make such a long song so bloody good, and just sets up the tone perfectly. The chorus on See Seaweed, I think, is absolutely stellar. I mean, the entire track, the runtime, like, is always keeping you on their toes. The guitar tone is absolutely fantastic as well, and the way it kind of like quietens down. Like, I don't know which part of the song it is. It's about 7 minutes in, and it just kind of thunders back in. Oh fuck, will blow me away until the end of time, this song. Like, every time I hear it, it's like the first time I've ever heard it. And then that's not even talking about the rest of the album. How to See Through Fog, I think, is fantastic. Some really interesting ways of kind of like speaking truth to power on this one. I like the way they do that across their albums. Actually, they always offer some really interesting insight, you know, from their own perspective as being like working class people. I think the final track is absolutely fantastic, with the way that it's talking about how to write a letter that you'll never send, sort of reeling off all these thoughts, all of these kind of worries or opinions on the way things are. I again, just a really well written song. And then of course you got a moat that you can stand in, which is a throwback to their punk days, and it ends up being probably their best ever punk song, the straight up punk type track that they were doing early on in their career. Jesus Christ, what a fucking anthem this one is. The Grey Leader, Leica, wow, I just get blown away by these tracks. I really do. I think they gave us just such a masterpiece of a rock album here. It really has everything. It has everything. It has interesting lyrics. It has the fiery energy of what you want from a punk album, and it has the slow burners, the really kind of eerie and twisted tracks, which they develop in such a really great way through the atmosphere of the instrumentals. The vocal performances are again amazing from Gareth Lydiard. I will repeat that I think sometimes he's a bit of an acquired taste, but you know what, I've always loved what he does, and you can't say he's not unique. I don't think you could say that. I think he's an incredibly unique talent, and yeah, going to an album like this isn't really, you know, something you'd get elsewhere. I feel like this is an album, and most of their albums, by the way, is a rare and unique experience, because not many bands do what they do. So yeah, there we go. Worst to best, the Drones. I couldn't not at least do one video where I gush over this band's music, at least at some point, and today was that day. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you've never listened to them, I hope you get some great recommendations here through what I've said. And if you have, I'd love to hear your ranking in the comments, because they're a well-known band amongst music nerds. I mean, well-known, however loose I can use that. But, you know, they don't really get a huge amount of talk. Like, you don't see them getting brought up often. Maybe we're too close to the days of their music. Maybe in 10 years people start looking at what they do as classics. I don't know, we'll have to see, but I think they're absolutely fantastic and I hope you do too. So thank you for watching this video, this worst to best. Let me know what I should do in this series next, which band. You could look at my Patreon as well, by the way, and even donate to me, and then you get a pretty confident pick there, and I'll probably choose what you say through that donation, so that would be great. But of course it's up to you, you don't have to donate anything to me, but if you would like to, that would be fantastic. Hope you enjoyed this video. Do have a good day. Sorry it's gotten a bit darker here in this video, but you know, the lighting shouldn't be too terrible. Thank you for watching, subscribe if you haven't already, and goodbye.